What are the running back rankings looking like for half-point PPR ahead of the NFL draft, and who are the risers and fallers? It's time for another edition of Stock Watch for the offseason here on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. Come to site now. We're getting ready for the NFL Draft. Hard to believe 2022 edition will be here next Thursday. We're starting off another week. Hope you had a good, rested holiday weekend there. Spring break for those of you who enjoyed that. We took a couple of days off at the end of last week, heading into Easter. So now it's time to restart here, and we did talk about the quarterbacks and where they stand now before the draft, looking at the rankings. They're the consensus expert rankings according to Fantasy Pros. Now we're going to turn our attention to the running backs and do the same thing, a stock watch update for you. We're going to look at where these players finished in scoring and half-point PPR last year, and then translate it to where they're ranked now and see if they're rising or falling up the boards. Here we know a lot of players have changed teams. We know a lot of things have changed situations, and guys getting older, guys getting into situations where they can be the feature back. So all kinds of things affecting the fantasy football rankings of running back and half-point PPR. We're going to take a look at them on today's show. Before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Let's dive right in, shall we? Look at these players that are on the move or staying the same here at running back. So, as you might not be surprised by this, two players from the AFC South remain on the top of the board. And when we do the scoring here, we're looking at average points per game. So we're taking out the factor of injury there and looking at it just based on what they did when healthy last season, how that measures up with where they're ranked at this very moment. We look at the top person for points per game. It wasn't Jonathan Taylor. It was actually Derrick Henry before he went down here. So Jonathan Taylor finished at number 2, but overall in scoring, we know Taylor stayed healthy. He's a very durable guy, doesn't miss a practice. He finished there at number 1 in scoring. So these two guys, as expected, in half-point PPR, are 1-2. Taylor taking over from Derrick Henry, being the younger back, not coming off the major injury here, and having the pass-catching potential as well. So really close here. I mean, Derrick Henry is due for a fade at some point. Foot injury is a concern. The volume has been pretty high. Taylor's on the rise here. So I think this is about right. Derrick Henry's still a hammer when he's out there. There could be some decline here. You're worried about a little bit in the offense, but you also think the Titans offense kind of rebounded well here with their offensive line. Also have now Robert Woods and A.J. Brown in the mix of the passing game, and Austin Hooper. They're helping blocking on top of those linemen and catching passes there, short to intermediate. So that should help Derrick Henry kind of stay where he's at before the injury here. But Jonathan Taylor, clearly the choice there as the number 1, but really these guys are very close to where they produced last year as the top overall fantasy football running back. They're, regardless of games played, they're in half point and the number 1 overall in terms of durability and total scoring there at the position. So those guys are right where they're at. Austin Ekeler is 3rd on the board, and he actually finished 3rd in half-point scoring. So this might surprise some people, but Ekeler also had the issue, soft tissue, but he played through them, didn't miss too much time. The Chargers have really let him loose here in the new offense where he's a centerpiece. They trust him completely here. They've had other backs work in. Justin Jackson has been the backup. They've had to change things up there. So when you look at Austin Ekeler, little dude, but very durable. He doesn't break down at all. Very tough nails. We love it that he understands fantasy football. So right there, where he finished at number 3 in half-point PPR, that's where Austin Ekeler picks up here in the rankings before the draft at running back. Now, at number 4 on the rankings, he actually finished higher than you might think. Christian McCaffrey. Do you want to go back down this road with this offense, with this injury history? Well, that's another story here. But look where CMC finished last year in terms of average points per game at running back and half point was number 8. So it's really not a stretch to put him at number 4. When he's healthy, McCaffrey produces, and we have part of the numbers were also skewed by the fact that he got hurt in a couple games and really brought down the numbers. So he didn't even get to complete that game like the one against the Texans there on Thursday night when he got hurt and kind of derailed what could have been another special season for him. So still finished 8th. So really, it's still a little bit of aggressive ranking for a guy that gets hurt quite a bit. The durability issues are real at number 4, but they're also looking at the production when he's out there. It is reliably very good here still. So really, it's up to you, the drafter, if you want to take McCaffrey off the board here. But in terms of the numbers, just looking at it, it's not a stretch to put him at number 4 when he was the 8th running back last year in his production when healthy in terms of average points per game. Now, this is a bit of a surprise that Dalvin Cook, he's 5th in the rankings at running back at half point per yard. That's not the surprise. The surprise is that he finished 11th last year. So really, you're getting a borderline RB1, RB2 at Dalvin Cook where you invested pretty much a high RB1 on him. So part of it was the injuries. There you had Alexander Madison need to work in a little bit more, diversified the passing game, more trusted throwing downfield. Cook missed time like he always does to some degree. So, but still in terms of points per game, not the way that you saw him as a machine. I think the biggest thing that hurt was not having the automatic touchdown production from Cook. So we know that can fluctuate. That can push him back up. We see some positive touchdown regression from him and going up to number 5. So I would split the difference. I put him more in that 8 range here at running back in half point PPR. Next up is Najee Harris. He finished there at 9. So pretty good rookie season and not a lot of blocking help either. And he had to grind out those yards, be a little bit reception and touchdown dependent, but he's going to be a centerpiece of this offense. They did work to upgrade their line in the interior a little bit in Pittsburgh. We'll see what happens if the quarterback situation changes. Is there enough respect there where they stay balanced quite a bit with Najee Harris? But either way, he's a good security blanket guy that you look at. So about the right spot here for Najee Harris as a top half RB1 going into 2022. Joe Mixon is number 7. This guy I might bump up a little bit. I might put him up near 4 because that's where he finished last year. Mixon had a big year. This line is very good for run blocking. I think they upgrade a little bit more here with Ted Karras and La'el Collins coming into the mix. So Bengals are going to be effective, score a lot of points. Mixon is important what they do playing off the passing game and Joe Burrow. So he's a guy I really feel confident about, and I think he can duplicate his numbers. Now, there's no bigger riser on the board than this next veteran going into his second year for the Broncos. He was right there teasing us. He was a borderline RB2 at 27. But this year he's ranked 8th. It's Javonta Williams. Melvin Gordon is still out there in free agency. Broncos have really not addressed that complementary power back situation. So Javonta is looking good as a potential feature back here. And we know how productive. I mean, that's incredible that he was a near RB2 here. Really looking at how Melvin Gordon was very productive. He finished as RB25 on the board. So he was dealing with another guy right there, and Williams is very productive. Now you take that production away. Yeah, that's why we have Javonte climbing up the boards and just a pure talent level. We're going to start there. I mean, he's just an extremely talented back. I think he's going to be challenging Najee Harris for the first back off the board out of North Carolina. But what a player Javonte Williams is as a talent. So bumping way up with the usage all the way to a high RB1 at number 8 there. So biggest riser by far, and for good reason here. He's going to get a lot of buzz. He's going to be very expensive to get here in 2022 in your drafts or auctions. All right, we'll go to our next guy. He's number 9, Nick Chubb. That's lines with what he finished last year. Right there at 10. He's always going to be limited by Kareem Hunt being involved here in the offense and his own injury question mark. You're not going to have the COVID list thing come into play as much this year. We know that, or at all, depending on what we're at with all the protocols going into the season. But look at Nick Chubb, about right at 10-9. Now, this is another faller here that people are down on. Alvin Kamara actually finished 5th in points per game, but the durability issue started to creep up. He's at a high volume in the Saints offense. There's not a lot of other stuff going on in here that you're totally relying on in the Saints offense. So it's not that the usage is being cut into, but Kamara's played hurt. He's battling through it, and the mileage adds up quite a bit. I know he is not in the traditional running back and getting pounded between the tackles, but still a lot of receptions. When you start your career with 81 receptions consistently, you're still getting in touches and still being worn down a little bit. So Alvin Kamara, that's about right, I think, based on where these other guys are at. You got to bump them down. I would also consider the next guy on the rankings ahead of Alvin Kamara. That is Deandre Swift. He finished as RB12 last year in terms of average points per game and half-point PPR. He's bumped up to 11, but I really like DeAndre Swift's situation here. I know you have other backs there, Jamal Williams and people that cut into his role, but Swift is special. We know that this offense could actually be really good here with TJ Hawkinson in the mix, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Overall, DJ Chark could help them as well. So DeAndre Swift in a good spot. This offensive line, Detroit, big asset here. So Swift, I really like him. I would even think about him over his Georgia back there, Nick Chubb. So a few spots higher. He's in the Javonta Williams hype machine to me because I love DeAndre Swift to stay on the field, and he'll be very productive as an RB1 here for you. And the last guy, you got to look at Leonard Fournette. People being rather conservative. He did finish as RB7 last year, but putting him at 12. So this is in terms of average points per game. Fournette returns here. Ronald Jones does not. They're looking at reshuffling the backfield a little bit, but Fournette and is trusted by Tom Brady. That's the biggest thing. Brady returned, and that helps Fournette's value. So I think it's pretty solid. Anywhere in that range here as an RB1, and you're in business here with Leonard Fournette in 2022. All right, that takes care of all the RB1s right now, according to the expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros on half-point PPR. We'll get into our next tier all the way through the end of our RB2s at 24, and then we'll go deep to 36, and we'll push it to 38 here for a reason in our final segment. So 2 more segments, a lot of running backs to talk about, 26 in specific terms. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Look, we're waiting for the NFL to come, but we got USFL. We got other action going on, and the Masters just ended, so a lot of big golf tournaments coming up as well to look at action on. So great place to have a great experience is betonline.net. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs. NBA is in full swing, and the start. We're on here in Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we will continue the show here in a moment, but I got to tell you something special that's coming to the network. Locked On NFL Draft live coverage, Odyssey NFL mock draft specials coming to you every day during draft week. Thanks for making Locked On NFL your first listen, and Locked On NFL Draft and Locked On Fantasy your first listens every day. Starting Thursday, April 28th, tune into Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineups of experts and insiders. And for those of you dying to know who your team will take, catch Odyssey and Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Special, hosted by Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show all week long, leading up to the first pick. Check it out, Locked On NFL Draft. Live Locked On NFL Draft YouTube page, Odyssey NFL Mock Draft, Odyssey and Locked On NFL Draft podcast feeds. Check it out, April 28th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time for Locked On NFL Draft Live. We'll come back at you 6:30 on day 2 of the draft for rounds 2 and 3, and then 11:30 a.m. for the final day on April 30th. And the Odyssey mock drafts, check it out, runs there from April 18th through the 25th. So a lot of good stuff here to check out on the Locked On Network. And we'll give you the coverage you need falling out from the draft from a fantasy football perspective right here on Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, let's dive into the next tier of running backs here. Antonio Gibson comes up in the rankings at number 13. This is a bump up from 18 from last year. J.D. McKissick did have a change of heart and returned to Washington, but a little bit better offense here. The Commanders hope to have with Carson Wentz leading the passing game. Gibson should be involved here more. So this is about right for Gibson. I think you could say anywhere in this RB2 range in half point makes sense. McKissick can be a thorn in the side, but Gibson is a very good scorer, and that's going to help his numbers here this season. Now, Aaron Jones holding steady at 14 here. That's where he finished last year. You have his buddy A.J. Dillon in the backfield, also a factor for the Packers. But, yeah, Jones, because of the presence of Dillon, has to be considered more of an RB2 at this juncture. At 21 in scoring last year was Daryl Henderson. That leads us to our guy who's ranked 15th. That's Cam Akers. So Daryl Henderson, very good season there, filling in terms of average points per game. You had Sonny Michel come in and help out down the stretch when Henderson was hurt. Henderson was on the shelf to end the season. Akers came back a little bit early, couldn't stay healthy. But, yeah, this is pretty aggressive here to put him at 15th, but they want him to be the man. Remember how high Cam Akers was on a lot of draft boards before he got hurt last year. So this is about right for the Rams running back that, again, we'll get ample opportunities to get feature touches here. Now, what do you do with James Conner? He drops down big time. He goes down 10 spots in the rankings to 16. He finished at 6, which is his jersey number there for the Cardinals. Look, there's no Chase Edmonds, but the touchdowns are hard to duplicate. There's still some sharing of the ball there in Arizona, but you just can't go there and say, okay, Connor's going to duplicate that. He was a scoring machine last year. I think it levels out. I think he's a borderline RB1, RB2 versus just being buried there at 16. So Connor has been very productive. That's why they brought him back there. And good fit for the Cardinals offense. So I think I side more with where he finished last year. Not as high, obviously, because of the scoring, but still right there, 11, 12, 13 range versus 16 on the board here for Connor. David Montgomery is ranked 17th. He finished 20th last year in half-point PPR. That's about right for Montgomery. We'll see what he can do with Justin Fields. I think that could help him in many ways here. So you also have to worry about Khalil Herbert being a bigger factor. So this is about right when you look at David Montgomery there, still at the end of the RB2s. Now, Saquon Barkley was all the way up to 18 here in the rankings as we last saw them. He finished 38th in terms of average. So this doesn't even compute that he was this high. I think Saquon Barkley, you have to be careful. The Giants are lukewarm on him. It's a new offensive coaching staff here with Brian Daboll. So we'll see with Barkley, but I think I'm going to lean more towards lower end RB2 than 18. A little aggressive for me. I know how special Barkley can be, but the injuries to me, if that affects Christian McCaffrey way up there, it definitely affects Barkley way down here. And again, Barkley actually could be more dramatic drop here where you look at it. So 18, just a little too aggressive, moving him up 20 spots there versus just 4 for McCaffrey. Ezekiel Elliott is a guy that's been down here. He finished as the RB13, surprising a lot of people, right on the cusp of finishing RB1. He was drafted a lot higher than that, so he was a disappointment. So expectations, perception versus reality, that all played. And Ezekiel Elliott is down here to 19. So I think that's about right. RB2, presence of Tony Pollard says that's where he should be. All right, then we look at the next guy. It is Josh Jacobs. He's ranked 20th. He's a finisher from last year at 16. So about right for Josh Jacobs. Not much to say there. You figure this offense is going to be more dynamic with Derek Carr, having Devontae Adams in the mix there for the Raiders, and Jacobs maybe having more of a central focus point of this offense with Josh McDaniels. The next guy, ranked 21st, didn't really play last year at all. I mean, he blew out his knee there. J.K. Dobbins. We saw how effective Latavius Murray there was in this Ravens backfield and really got some good production out of what they were struggling to do. So really, Devonta Freeman and Murray put up some decent numbers here, filling in for Baltimore. Even Le'Veon Bell had a cup of coffee in this offense. So we look at it, J.K. Dobbins. Gus Edwards cuts into it quite a bit, but back to the hype a little bit on Dobbins as an RB2 with some nice upside there. This is about the appropriate value. I'll be careful about Elijah Moore. He's 22nd. He finished 19, so people are adjusting accordingly. Right now, Elijah Mitchell would be the lead back there for the 49ers, but we can't always sleep on Kyle Shanahan changing things. Maybe we'll incorporate Trey Sermon back in the mix if he gets out of the doghouse. So all these things we have to factor, but right now, you can't go any higher than Elijah Mitchell as an RB2, especially that he gives you not much in the passing game for half-point PPR. David Harris is 23rd. He finished 15th last year, but Ramondre Stevenson cutting into a little bit more. James White, different style of offense here without McDaniels. So, yeah, this is about right to temper expectations on David Williams. And finally, The last guy we'll talk about in this segment pops up here, didn't play either all last year, like J.K. Dobbins, one of those big casualties before the season with a big knee injury. It is Travis Etienne. He comes in at 24, so very aggressive number for Etienne, especially with the new offense. There were Doug Peterson coming in to lead as an offensive-minded head coach. What do you get with Travis Etienne? Very interesting indeed there to go up that high. But James Robinson did finish at 26, so that's adjusting a little bit. That Etienne will be a little bit more involved in the passing game to bump up his numbers in half points. So about reasonable, but it also disses Robinson from his recovery from Achilles that you can't rule him out as being a bigger factor in this backfield. We also know Doug Peterson can split a little bit. So I'm going to calm the hype train a little bit for Etienne here in year two. And I think taking him as the last RB2 is a little bit aggressive at this stage before the draft. Some other running backs come into play here on the board. All right, we will close looking again through number 38. We will get through the last RB3 at 36, but we'll go beyond that to 38 for a reason. We'll do that in our final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Built Bar is what's going to carry you through the rest of the year. Look, we've made New Year's resolutions, but we're in April now, deep into April, and the only place that's going to help you stick with it all throughout the year to help you stay healthy and happy is Built Bar. And really, it's easy to eat right because of Built Bar, because it almost feels like it's not really any kind of resolution, because I actually enjoy eating them, and you will too. If you try their puffs, you're trying one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. The puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallow. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with incredible flavors: yummy cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. All these are so good. These are going to be some of your new favorite Built Bars. All the Built Bars you covered are covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right. That includes the puffs, 100% real chocolate, low calorie, high protein. Make sure you replace your candy bars with these, folks. They're much better for you. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Check out the macros on most of the Built Bars. 130 calories, 4 grams sugar, 4 grams of sugar. That's very low. And 4 net carbs and 17 grams of protein. So a lot of good stuff without much of the bad stuff, and all deliciousness here. Check out some of the flavors, including mint brownie, coconut almond. They always have new flavors coming out. Check them out at Built Bar. They're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first and figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every time. Just to get it on Built Bar right now, go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. The promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Okay, it is time to close the show looking at the consensus expert rankings, half-point PPR, the guys that are ranked from 25 through 38 at the position, and how they compare to last year's finish. So let's close the show. And don't forget, we will look at wide receivers, obviously, tomorrow. We've gone through the quarterbacks. If you missed that show, check it out. This is focusing on the running backs and, again, stock watch where they were and where they're going here so far before the draft. A.J. Dillon comes in at number 25 in the rankings. This is pretty aggressive. He finished as RB33 in average half-point PPR scoring last year. They have Aaron Jones at 14, so this cuts into Aaron Jones. Jones didn't really drop much at all in relation to this, so you have Dillon rising a little bit. I think it's a bit aggressive. Jones is still a special back. They haven't really changed too much in the way the Packers approach the running game. I would much rather target this guy in this range. It would be Michael Carter of the Jets. He was bringing it. He was getting there. They had a stupid committee with Kevin Coleman and some others there that didn't quite work out. And then Coleman is back in the mix. So a little frustrating there. But Michael Carter's a special back here. He should get more touches here. So I'm more interested in him. Second year, Carter, I think, can be special with the Jets. Their offensive line should be healthier and help, as well as the passing game to provide support for Carter. Next up is Miles Sanders. He's ranked 27th here. He was the 40th running back in terms of average half-point PPR scoring last year. A little tough situation, but maybe some of the guys being streamlined out of here is going to help him. But again, it's going to be tough to break free with Sirianni, the head coach. Does he really trust him as a Jonathan Taylor? I don't see that. So Eagles could also get some running back help in this draft. So not seeing it, I'm going to drop him lower here than his 27th ranking. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, pretty steady at 28. That's about right. You can't go into it. Ronald Jones going down. This was the player that I was talking about deeper past 36 at number 37, moving teams from Tampa Bay to Kansas City. So he's going to cut it. So that's why you have to keep Clyde Edwards-Helaire there, even though they've changed the backfield behind him is still legitimate competition there for some key touches in Ronald Jones. Devin Singletary was able to finish 29th. Really is a tale of two halves where he's very involved, treated like a feature back down the stretch, and hardly used. Consistently had some issues there. He trumped Zach Moss, but will they have another back in the mix? So we have to be careful there. 29-29 are his numbers. Rashad Penny had a great finish last year to finish as a RB2 at 23. So biggest year so far as a Seahawk. They brought him back. They did not pick up his option, but then they decided to bring him back. You have to worry about Chris Carson and others here. So 30th is a little bit low here for Penny, given that he ran so well. So bump him up a little bit, maybe cool off on the Sanders and Edwards-Helaire, Singletary in relation to him. You have Kareem Hunt. He's at 31. Yeah, I think that's about right. He did finish as the RB22 average-wise last year and half point, but again, they also like Dearness Johnson cutting in with Nick Chubb, so that's going to hurt your Hunt's value. Chase Edmonds does have a potential lead role with the Dolphins, but we're not totally buying it with Raheem Mostert there. So you look at it, Edmonds at 31 last year and finishing 32. I think it's about right to keep him status quo until we know a little bit more about how the Dolphins backfield is going to play out here with their newcomers. Tony Pollard, this is why Ezekiel Elliott's down. You have him at 33 on the board. He was the 37th running back, so bump up for him. That kind of matches where Elliott slides a little bit, 6 spots from his 13 finish from last year to 19, so that plays along with that for sure. You have James Robinson, we talked about, the Etienne there at 24. Robinson's way down at 34 again. That's what's going to happen. They used the first-round pick on Etienne last year. Different kind of offense, but I think they're going to feature Etienne more as a normal running back here. That's going to help his value with Robinson recovering from a big injury. Melvin Gordon is ranked, but he doesn't have a team, so you really can't take a player without a team really yet. So he's ranked at 35th, so the penultimate RB3 here in half point. He was 25th last year. He's not going to duplicate that without a team and really could fall right down if he even goes to team with a committee approach here in 2022, because it's not going to be as good as it was with Williams, that's for sure. Ramondre Stevenson here at 36. So he's the last RB3 that actually has a team here that we're looking at. And he's at 39. That's about right. That's why Damian Harris having a little bump down here. So looking at that for sure. And Ronald Jones, we talked about 37. This is why we had to bring up number 38. Massive drop for this player. People are just skeptical that he's going to be the main guy here as the Falcons made a big move, went away from Matt Ryan, they go to Marcus Mariota, or they're going to change things up in the backfield. But Cordarrelle Patterson is back in Atlanta, but he was 17 last year. That shocked everyone. He was one of the ultimate steals at any position there. 38th now. I think it's a little bit split the difference. I think he still has RB2 consideration if they're still looking at him as potentially the lead back there for the Falcons here, even with the change without Matt Ryan at quarterback. So a lot of things to look at there, but I think it's a little harsh to put Patterson that far down, especially when we're not even sure if there's going to be real viable backfield alternatives that are not Mike Davis in Atlanta. All right, there you have it. There's your running back stock watch show here for you. Check it out if you missed the quarterback stock watch. And again, we'll move forward with the wide receiver stock watch next. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first lane every day. Again, wide receiver stock watch, and we'll close our mini series here with our tight end stock watch. Now, make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with inside analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer. Have a great day and see you tomorrow as we continue our look at offseason ranking stock watch with our wide receiver